Madam Chair, we live.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting. The date is June 28th, 2003, and it is 7:04 p.m. Will Commissioner Mario Maciel lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Right now for your heart. After me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under justice for all.
Thank you for that. Ms. Washington, can I please get a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I'd like to indicate that we have one vacant seat on the dais. Chair Jen Escobosa,
Here.
Vice Chair Eric Pena,
Present.
Commissioner Mario Maciel Jr.,
Here.
and Commissioner Ricardo Vasquez.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving along to the consent calendar. I would like to put it to the commission to review and my apologies. We're going to take a little bit of a step back. We are now going to open oral communications. Anyone wishing to address the commission can please step up to the podium and share out your thoughts. All right, seeing no interest, we are going to now close communications and move along to the consent calendar. So again, I'm putting to the commission to review the minutes for the regular planning commission meeting we had on May 24th.
Make a motion to approve.
And I'll second.
Can I get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Jen Escobosa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eric Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Mario Maciel Jr.,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ricardo Vasquez.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, motion passes. I'm slow today, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Up next on the agenda is a request for a tentative parcel map to consolidate 6 lots and a vacated street into one 91,418 square foot lot for the development of the Zocalo Civic Plaza project. The site consists of zoning designated of mixed use 1 within the downtown transit oriented development specific plan, dated for 2016, located in downtown Baldwin Park at the northwest intersection of Main Avenue and Pacific Avenue, extending south of Main Street. The staff is requesting to continue this item to a date uncertain. It is recommended that,
I'll motion to extend to a date uncertain.
I will second.
Roll call.
Can I get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Jen Escobosa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eric Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Mario Maciel Jr.,
Yes.
Commissioner Ricardo Vasquez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I just would like to state for the record that we did receive a letter of concern regarding the agenda item as well as an email from the firm of Allen Matkins. We will, for the record, stating that we did receive letters of concern. Thank you.
Thank you. And for my own education, those letters would then be submitted into public record and we'll read them out loud when we revisit the topic.
That is correct. That'll be part of the record, yes.
Thank you. Moving right along to the staff report. Ron, I believe your team's got something for us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Commission staff staff. First off, excited that we're finally, after a 2-year period, staff, along with the consultant MIG, diligently working on the preparation of the housing element. So we have this housing element along with 2 other general plan updates. And we have with us today from MIG, Genevieve Sherrill, who will be providing the presentation. Thank you. Oh, I apologize. I jumped the gun.
No.
Sorry. Associate Planner Melissa Chippers will be providing the presentation on the general plan amendment and zone change for Barnes Park. Thank you. Just excited about the housing element.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and members of the Commission. The request before you is case numbers AGP 23-01 and Z 23-01. It's a request to amend the general plan land use designation from single family to open space and a zone change to change the zoning map land use designation from single family to open space to facilitate the expansion of Barnes Park located at 3301 Petriti Avenue. Next slide, please. So the project site is currently a vacant 77,965 square foot parcel located at the cross streets of Petriti Avenue and Bess Avenue. The current general plan land use designation of the subject property is residential, and the land use zoning classification is residential, single family residential R1. Next slide, please. So the city of Baldwin Park is proposing to utilize the property as open space recreation. The proposed general plan amendment from residential to open space and the zone change map from single family residential to open space is to allow for the conversion of an existing single family to outdoor recreational uses. The proposed use of the site is for a expansion of the community park. Next slide, please. Here we have a rendering of the proposed site plan for the expansion of Barnes Park. So the project is an interagency project that involves different city departments as well as partnerships with outside agencies. The project was included in the Upper San Gabriel River Enhanced Watershed Management Program Plan prepared in June of 2015. The project will achieve a pollutant load reduction to downstream water bodies by capturing wet and dry runoff. And the captured runoff will be discharged into a subsurface storage system that will facilitate the infiltration and groundwater recharge. In addition to water quality benefits, the project will have additional benefits included increased water conservation through groundwater recharge, community enhancements through the park expansion, and amenity improvements, as well as public outreach and educational facilities. In addition to the infiltration and underground recharge component, most of the existing improvements at the park will be demolished except for the existing building, splash pad, and a portion of the parking lot, and will be replaced with new and enhanced features. As you can see here, the park amenities include additional parking throughout the existing parking lot and some street side diagonal parking along Petriti Avenue, south of the existing parking lot. There will also be new modified and new trails throughout the park, 2 new basketball courts around the park, grass and turf improvements, and space for 2 soccer fields, new, if I can pronounce this, futsal court, drought tolerant landscaping throughout, trees and new irrigation system, surface whales and pedestrian bridges on the north side of the park, new dog park area on the south side of the existing park, play lots, new and improved shade shelters, space for outdoor movie nights, new staff restrooms attached to the existing building, and enhanced fencing and wall around the park as well. Before we get into the renderings, just to give everybody a better idea. So to the far left over here is where the dog park is going to be located. Here we have the new soccer fields, new play area, the existing recreational building, 2 new basketball courts, and the futsal field would be located here. Next slide, please. Here we have a rendering of the dog park. I believe there's going to be areas for small and large dogs as well. Next slide, please. Rendering of the 2 new full grass soccer fields. Next slide, please. The new enhanced playground area. Next slide. The improved recreation center. Next slide, please. The 2 basketball courts here. Next slide. And the futsal field located to the far right of the property. Next slide, please. So an initial study mitigated negative declaration for the park improvements was prepared in August of 2022 and was circulated for public review on from October 11th, 2022 through November 10th, 2022. The project analyzed the park expansion, demolition of certain facilities, as well as the new improvements at the park. And as such, the general plan amendment and zone change is consistent with the certified ISMND State Clearinghouse number 2022-10008, filed with the State of California Governor's Office of Planning and Research, as well as the CEQANet web portal. We did receive 1 letter from the Department of California Department of Transportation, just acknowledging receipt of the ISMND, and they had no further comments from there. And then after wrapping the project, there would be no further environmental analysis required, and a notice of exemption will be filed for the project as well. Next slide, please. So staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt resolutions PC 23-14 and PC 23-15 entitled recommending that the City Council approve the general plan amendment and zone change, amending the zoning map land use designation, and certifying the initial study mitigated negative declaration of environmental impact. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for any questions. And we also have Associate Engineer David Lopez with our Public Works Divisions for any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open it to the commission for any questions that they have. And if it's okay with you all, I would like to start off with the questions. I have more serious questions, but first of all, can someone tell me what futsal is? I'm sorry, I've never heard that word before.
I think that's an important, serious question because we're all wondering that here.
So from my understanding and research, it's pretty much an indoor soccer field. So it's similar to soccer. David, if you want to add to that a little bit, but I think that's the gist of it. Or am I wrong?
Let's say it correctly. So it's I don't know if you're toque. It's where you have, it's a quick way of playing soccer indoors or outdoors. In this case, it's going to be within the property that's in question of being rezoned on the north side, and it's going to take up also the city yard that's out there. It's going to have high fences to be able to have the balls not go into the neighbors or into the freeway right away. And it's enclosed, and you could actually kick the ball onto the walls and be able to use like almost like pull, boom, boom, to a next opponent or to try to make a goal. So the objective is still the same. It's just a really fast, quick, faster game than soccer. It's it uses special shoes, and everything else is pretty much the same. It's fun.
Thank you so
Should all
much for
try it.
humoring me. I will ensure to look up some videos on YouTube and understand it more. But I promise I do have some actual questions outside of futsal. I did see that there's plans for additional parking. I wonder if there's been any conversations or studies about how that will impact the residents who do live along that street, or along the side of Patriti, who do utilize the existing parking as spaces for their own cars.
So the diagonal parking is just an additional enhancement because we anticipate this project to be a regional attraction. There is going to be El Monte, us, Beaumont Parkians, and others that may see note of the nice improvements. This is a really nice project. Glad to be a part of it. And one of the main things that I'll come back to the response to your question, but one of the main things of this project is to really capture a lot of the rainwater from 420 acres of residential neighborhoods, bring it into the park through a 81-inch pipe, put it underground in infiltration chambers that's 10 acre feet. So what that means, it's like for every 1 acre, 10 feet high, within underground, about 20 plus feet underground. It's really neat. That's the most expensive part of the project, moving the dirt and making the hole to be able to build this apparatus underground. For the parking, there's going to be additional parking. So instead of it just being parallel, now it's going to be angular, and so that accommodates even more vehicles. Plus, on the north side of the existing parking lot, that's going to be expanded further to the north to also accommodate more parking. It's not going to have the covering yet. We anticipate that to be part of a future project. For the solar panels, right now we have a solar farming at the existing parking lot, but that's not going to be part of this project. But that will be additional parking as well.
Thank you.
So question, Mr. Lopez. So on the parking, and I'm not sure if you did answer the question, but has you guys reach out to the community in that area about parking and what's the issue with parking there, what they think?
Well, currently, a lot of the residents use the parking, especially for street sweeping. So they park in the park itself, and I don't anticipate that that's going to change. And they'll have the additional parking as the angled parking will allow. So they're gaining more in that sense. Sorry, did I answer your question?
No, I don't think you did. I'm sorry, but so did the city reach out to the community, maybe get their opinions on what they?
Yes, we've had 2 community events already, and this last one was in April, and we're anticipating to do another one. And if you like, we can send out an invitation to nice folks, and so you could also see the what concerns people have. The residents, the main concern has been the homeless issue, and to address that, the city has proposed and has conceptually had approval from Caltrans to put in what they call it. We call it a block wall. They call it they don't want us to call it a sound wall, but it's essentially a sound wall where it's going to be 15 feet high, and going to have a maintenance door on one side so that Caltrans still has access from the freeway side, but will prevent homeless from coming from the state right away into the cities right away. Plus, we've going to enter into an agreement for us to maintain the vegetation on the west side of the park along the sound wall that exists along the 605 freeway. So that's something that we noted the last time, where they had homeless also living within that vegetation. Some of them were camouflaged at the time that we had our visit with Caltrans. So they saw that to be concerned as well, and they've conceptually approved it for us to build that wall.
I'm sure that's definitely a concern for many people, right? But I've walked that part of the community, been in that park, and the parking is pretty bad, right? Even before the new, or at least the new project. So I guess the question would be, is parking, additional parking, is that parking that's going to be enforced like after hours? Or people are going to be able to park there, the residents? Because if you go, I'm sure you guys have been there, but there's a lot of vehicles and they're struggling with parking already. In our city, we don't have enough parking. So again, the question would be, are people able to park there after hours?
I don't see that changing, but I will pose a question to make sure that there is assurance that overnight parking will not be disallowed. And that'll be with our Director of Public Works.
Okay, so right now we're not sure if that's
Right now, there has not been talk to make the parallel park, what they call the angle parking, restricted only for park use, but I don't see that there would be a restriction at this point.
And I'm
Every
saying
time would-
because comparing to other cities where they'll put a sign, no parking from this time to this time, or only during parking hours. Well, obviously guests would park there, but say park closes at 5, no one's able to park there. PD could go by and cite the vehicle or parking enforcement.
Yeah,
Then that's taking away parking from the residents that are there.
Yeah, the only signs that I know that we're trying to enforce are going to be the street sweeping signs. So no parking for street sweeping. I don't think that the angle parking is going to be affected by that.
Okay.
It's only going to be along the curb lines that's going to be enforced.
Okay. And then why two soccer fields, I guess?
Oh, there's a big demand. It's Baldwin Park has a lot of teams. I don't know if you
Right.
see them at Morgan Park as well, and we anticipate that's going to be in full use. The grass that we're putting in it's a marathon type where it's resistant to a lot of play, but I'm sure still we'll have to maintain it and keep it up. The futsal and they all complement each other, so we don't have direction yet as to like if you have reservations, if it's going to be, it's just going to be for the community at this point. But like most things, if there is a high demand, then we'll have to set up a procedure to give Baldwin Parkians, or Baldwin Park residents, preference.
Okay. Yeah, and I understand there's definitely a high demand on it, but I would maybe consider, instead of having two soccer fields in one park, well, maybe, putting one soccer field in a different location in our community, because now we have an indoor soccer field, or what do they call it again? Well, the indoor, I guess,
The
field.
futsal court.
Yeah, futsal. So, I don't know, but I mean, that's something I guess council or commission and with the planning could talk further. And then, yeah, those are my questions.
I have another question. Going back to, you've already shared that some of the concerns of the residents were around safety. Again, sorry, like Commissioner Vasquez, I've walked Barnes Park trails before, and it gets pretty dark when the sun goes down. Do these plans include any additional lighting just to ensure the area is well lit and residents do feel safe using it?
Yes. So there's going to be additional lighting as LED lighting. It's been photometrically based so that it's well lit at night. And then the field lighting, the sports lighting is still going to come back. And so the fields are going to be able to be used at night as well.
I have one more question and then I'll give you all the opportunity. But you mentioned that in developing the infiltration system, you're going to have to dig pretty big holes into the park. Do you know how long, or the timeline of how long that it's going to be impacted, the Barnes Park use for the residents?
Yes, right now we have a schedule of 18 months. So we're looking at summer of 2025 when the park will be in full use again. We will have the Family Recreation Center open through the project, unless we have to bring in equipment or something momentarily to bring in equipment. But it's supposed to be open for the most part with staff.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, in addition to great questions, what we'll do is we've made note of the questions that you've had. As the associate engineer has mentioned, there's already been one outreach community meeting. There's one that is to follow, and we'll be sure to share that meeting date with you in case you guys are interested in attending that meeting. For confirmation, there was not a parking study that was prepared for this. Before you tonight, essentially is the zone change and the general plan amendment. The park was approved by the council previously. This project is going out to bid September.
August or September.
August, September, and construction would start sometime in January. So this, before you tonight, is essentially just allowing the use so that way it's allowed under the underlying zoning and general plan. But we've made note of your questions, and we'll be sure to follow up with those with our Public Works Director and engineering staff.
Thank you. Before we move to public hearing, I want to give the rest of the commission a chance to ask their questions.
I had a quick question, if I may. To staff, the area behind the residence, does that belong to the city or does that belong to Caltrans? Literally behind the property that we're talking about, there's
Yes.
extra land
That
before we
belongs
get to the 605.
Yeah, that's where we have the problem or the issue with the homeless encampments, and that's part of the state right of way.
Okay, no, the homeless are all in between the gate of Barnes Park and the sound wall is where I see them. And in between those gutters that we have going underneath, I don't know if it's underneath the freeway, that's where they're at. That's one of my main concerns, that area needs to be cleaned up and done something different with it, because it's a waste of land to have the sound barrier and then a gate, literally, I think it's like 8 feet from the sound barrier. It makes no sense to me, and that's where the actual homeless put up their tents.
So we have engaged Caltrans. We did ask that we remove the fence and enter into a maintenance agreement for the city to take over the maintenance, and we would remove plantings where people can hide and replace it with, like a mound, and have people be able to sit and be able to just enjoy the park from that point of view. Caltrans has denied that request. They want to maintain it. They don't want to have the city maintain it. It went to their headquarters to Sacramento, the request, and they denied it. But we did get the wall. So that's a plus. And with the additional pressures from the city, knowing that there is this issue, we anticipate that Caltrans will maintain it, that area, cut it down, remove the vegetation, be able to have it like a septed, be able to see through and not have hiding places.
Yeah. My other concern is I saw the plan, but I didn't see if the actual seating area for parties are going to be updated or are they being taken out? Because I do see that the dog area doesn't show any of that.
The polygon structures, shade structures that are currently there are going to be removed and replaced with different polygon structures. Some are going to be a little bit larger than even the one that's out there now for the big parties, and it will be available through reservation.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Right, just a couple questions, Madam Chair. So again, thank you so much for bearing with us.
No problem. Here to your
So-
disposal.
Thank you. So just a couple more questions. I know Commissioner Vasquez was kind of looking at this a little bit when he was asking a question about just sort of feedback from the community. I know, Ron, you had also mentioned that there'll be sort of additional community meetings. I do know that in the report there was some statement that there were sort of some mailers and postings for residents living within the radius. I'm wondering if we've heard back from, my assumption is no, because I'm sure it would have been included already, but were there any responses or written responses or verbal responses from those in the affected area, using air quotes here?
Okay.
Sure.
So we did notice this item back in April and again in June, and we didn't receive any public comment.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So I think overall this is a very exciting project. I mean, I know in the past we've heard that Baldwin Park is park poor, so I think it's very exciting just to see sort of additional pockets or additional uses of this sort of type of land that we can leverage not only for our Baldwin Park residents or Baldwin Parkins, but as well as our neighbors as well, because we definitely do want to have just sort of some sort of pride that we're not going to West Covina for a dog park, et cetera, that actually we want folks to stay, within the city of Baldwin Park, and even for our neighbors is to be also maybe a little jealous of, of us. So this is exciting. And also as far as kind of the use of the water, retaining water, and sort of collaboration with other agencies out there for environmental impacts in a positive way. I know all of us have gone through several community meetings. I know we have several hats. We wear several hats, as planning commissioners, and I know some of my fellow commissioners have also expressed sort of the public safety. I know that when you have kind of just sort of these enhanced parks or these sort of new spots, I know it definitely attracts unhoused people. Understandably, we don't have the solution. The city council doesn't have sort of the solution to solve this issue. I know that it's a huge step for all of us here in the state of California. I know when we've attended these sort of community meetings, folks have talked about the idea of sort of park rangers, they're having more police activity, and when I mean activity, just patrols. So I'm not sure who it lies, whether it's sort of the city council or public works or even community development, but just the importance of kind of finding those funds to actually have. I understand that there is a wall, that could sort of separate, I wouldn't say separate sort of the unhoused folks with the park itself, but I think can serve sort of as a deterrent, or at least for our residents and neighbors to feel a sense of safety, or at least security. So I think the idea of park rangers have been circulated. So again, it's just encouraging everyone here and even those who are listening that might be perhaps sort of instead of again, hiring quality police officers is a hard thing right now, and I get that. And I think looking at park rangers might be an option where, again, those who are going to be actively attending, benefiting from these parks, again, a park ranger might be a good solution for that safety and security of our residents, and as well as our neighbors. So again, it's just leaving that idea for all of us here and just sort of the rest of the city, but overall very excited for this project.
Thank you. If there are no other questions from the commission, I can now open public hearing around the proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, if there are any interested parties, now is your chance. Seeing no interested parties, I will now close public hearing. And I will motion to amend the general plan land use designation from single family to open space and a zone change to change the zoning map land use designation from single family to open space to facilitate the expansion of Barnes Park.
And then since the motion was made, I'll go ahead and second that.
Can I please get a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Dennis Gabosa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eric Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Mario Maciel Jr.,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ricardo Vasquez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We will now move. Sorry, my apologies. The Planning Commission has voted to amend the general plan land use for Barnes Park from single family to open space. And now we can move over to the second item on the agenda.
Madam Chair, just would like to add that this item is tentatively scheduled for City Council consideration for the July 19th City Council meeting.
Thank you. So the second item on the agenda is a request for consideration and recommendation of approval to the City Council on general plan amendments to repeal and replace the housing element, safety element, health and sustainability element to meet the housing, safety, and environmental justice element state law requirements. Or there's a lot of zoning codes. But do you have a presentation prepared for us today?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Since you already heard my pre-introduction, we'll say it again. We are excited to bring this before the commission for consideration to recommendation to the City Council for our updated housing element, along with two other general plan updates. We have Genevieve Sherrill from MIG who will be presenting the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission tonight. Thank you so much for having us. I'm going to turn most of the presentation over to my colleague Jackie Martinez at MIG, who has done a lot of the heavy lifting on this project and very familiar with everything because she wrote it all. So turning it over to her.
Hi, good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm happy to be here tonight. So this evening, if I can get the next slide, please. So this evening, I'll provide an overview of the project and community engagement process, review the updates to the housing element, environmental justice element, and safety element, and the recommended actions from staff. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin by briefly reviewing what the general plan is. The general plan is a long-term document that sets the course for development in the city. The general plan is a commitment of shared values for the city expressed through goals, objectives, and action items. Baldwin Park's general plan was last adopted in 2002. Next slide, please. So this project involved a focused update to 3 of the general plan's chapters, also referred to as elements: housing, environmental justice, and safety. Next slide, please. Over the last 2.5 years, we, MIG, have been working intently with staff to complete updates to those 3 elements in order to meet state law requirements. During this time, a broad cross-section of the community was engaged in order to incorporate community input, feedback, and ideas into the various aspects of the project. This included community workshops for both the housing and environmental justice elements. The workshops were advertised to the local community, housing and environmental justice advocates, and service providers. The workshops were also provided in English and Spanish. Next slide, please. In conjunction with the workshops, surveys were also made available to gather community input. The housing survey was completed by 110 residents and provided insights into current housing challenges, areas where new housing is most desired. Residents indicated that they would like to see this near transit, and opportunities to convert motels into housing. The EJ survey was completed by 123 residents and stakeholders in Baldwin Park. The EJ survey provided insights on environmental justice, challenges, priorities, and strategies to address concerns. Next slide, please. 4 workshops were also held with the Planning Commission and City Council in 2021 to receive input from the community and direction from decision makers on the approach to meeting the RHNA and potential housing implementation programs, as well as safety and environmental justice strategies. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll now provide an overview of the updates made to the 3 elements, beginning with the housing element. So the housing element is a required element of the city's general plan. It's the only element of the general plan that has to be updated on a regular schedule. every 8 years. For the Southern California region, the current 6-cycle housing element period spans from 2021 through 2029. The housing element is also one of the only parts of the general plan that has to be reviewed by a state agency known as the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD for short. Additionally, state laws have linked updates to other topic chapters when a housing element is updated, since it has a periodic update requirement. Recent laws require an update to the safety element when a housing element is adopted, and to incorporate environmental justice into the general plan, so which is why the project involved a focused update to these 3 elements. Next slide, please. The housing element is a unique element of the general plan because much of the housing element is driven by statewide legislative intent rather than local preference. The legislature has declared that the availability of housing is of vital statewide importance. Local and state governments have a responsibility to facilitate the improvement and development of housing to address housing needs for all economic segments of the community. Next slide, please. Baldwin Park's housing element is structured around the 5 main components required by HCD. These parts of the element are used to establish existing baseline conditions and includes information such as population and housing characteristics, regulatory constraints to housing development, land resources available to meet the city's identified housing need, and an evaluation of how well the city implemented the last element. A new law went into effect in 2021 that also requires an in-depth analysis related to fair housing. All of these components are essentially the foundation for the housing plan, which includes the city's housing goals, policies, and implementing programs. Next slide, please. The housing element is essentially the city's plan for meeting its fair share of the regional housing needs. The Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, is the number of housing units HCD determines is needed on a regional basis. So SCAG, the regional planning agency for Southern California, then develops a methodology to distribute these units to each jurisdiction. The allocation identified for Baldwin Park is 2,001 units. To come up with these numbers, SCAG looked at not just the future need, but also the pent-up need that hasn't been met. Next slide, please. Moving forward for the next years, the housing element must be drafted to show how Baldwin Park will accommodate its RHNA of 2,001 units. The city has done this by indicating to the state projects that are in the pipeline as either proposed or approved projects. The city has also reviewed potential new sites that include any vacant sites, underutilized sites that could see redevelopment, and the potential for accessory dwelling units within existing neighborhoods. Next slide, please. It's important to note that the RHNA is not a construction obligation. The role of the housing element is to show that the city's land use and zoning policies will allow for a certain level of development, but the city is not required to build these units. Next slide. So this table summarizes the site's inventory, which includes the number of units identified through approved and proposed projects, ADU projections, and vacant and underutilized sites in residential, mixed use, and downtown zones. We were able to identify a surplus of 326 units. HCD strongly recommends that jurisdictions identify units beyond the RHNA as a buffer. Next slide, please. And so this map just shows the location of the sites included in the inventory. Okay, next slide. Now the foundational part of the housing element is the housing plan, which lays out the city's goals, policies, and programs. The plan addresses 5 topics that are required to be addressed under state law. They include conserving and improving existing affordable housing stock, assisting in the development of affordable housing, providing enough sites to achieve a variety of housing, removing governmental constraints to housing development, and promoting fair and equal housing practices. So in the following slides, I'll go over some of the notable programs that fall under some of these goals. Next slide, please. Thank you. Under Goal H2.0, Program H2-4 calls for studying and, if appropriate, adopting an inclusionary housing ordinance. The implementation for this program is currently underway, and that's through a regional effort between Baldwin Park, South El Monte, and El Monte. Next slide, please. Under Goal H3.0, we have programs to implement strategies to support ADU targets and projections. We also have programs to address homelessness by amending the zoning code to support the development of emergency shelters and motel conversions. Next slide. Goal H3.0 also includes programs to facilitate the development of affordable housing on certain sites. I would like to note that the implementing ordinance before you tonight is for Program H3-6, which is to create a zoning overlay that regulates sites used in previous housing elements to meet the RHNA. The implementation of this program is required by HCD for the certification of the city's housing element. Next slide. Under Goal H4.0, there are several zoning updates that will need to be completed in order to implement the housing plan, one of which is developing and adopting objective design standards, which is an effort that the city has just completed. Next slide. Here are some additional zoning updates under Goal H4.0, which were identified by HCD as ways to address potential governmental constraints to the development of housing. From here, I'd like to point out that Program H4-5 has been included in the housing plan to promote the development of more affordable housing through the state density bonus law, rather than having applicants go through a variance process. Next slide. Moving on to Goal H5.0, we have programs to affirmatively further fair housing that focus on increasing housing mobility, access to opportunity, and increasing public investment in low opportunity areas. Next slide. And then under Program H5-4, it also promotes civic engagement during the planning process of development projects, as well as developing anti-displacement policies as appropriate. Next slide. So basically, these previous slides summarize the content of the housing element. Once drafts are complete, all jurisdictions are required to submit their housing elements to HCD for review and compliance with state laws. However, because of the significant laws that have been passed recently relating to housing, no jurisdictions in the SCAG region have been able to complete their review with HCD in just one round of review and receive a clear finding of compliance with state laws by the department. So that's usually because many of the laws are somewhat subjective, so there is a lot of back and forth with HCD to ensure compliance. And each time a draft is submitted to HCD, they have 60 days to complete their review. And then at the end of those 60 days, they provide either comments on changes they require or an all clear letter that the housing element complies with state housing element law. Next slide, please. Baldwin Park submitted its first draft element in October 2021, following a year of significant public engagement and drafting of the housing element. There were an additional 2 rounds of formal review with HCD based on the comments received at the end of each review period. The 4th submittal was an informal review that required additional minor revisions. And with the incorporation of these revisions, the city received verbal confirmation on May 10th, 2023, in a call with HCD reviewers that essentially said, with the incorporation of these final revisions, the housing element would be considered compliant with the state housing element law. The adopted housing element will then be submitted for HCD's final and formal review in July to affirm that all required edits have been made and no new changes are proposed. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, the update to the housing element also triggers a new state law requirement, and that is to incorporate environmental justice into the general plan. Environmental justice is defined as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the environmental regulations and policies. So fair treatment means that no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of negative environmental consequences resulting from industrial, governmental, and commercial operations and policies. Environmental justice seeks to correct inequalities with regard to pollution and health burdens that certain neighborhoods face. Consistent with this new law, the city's existing health and sustainability element, which was adopted in 2014, was updated to include a focus on environmental justice and was renamed to the health, sustainability, and environmental justice element. So I'd like to note that the revised sections for this element have been highlighted in the document that you have in your packets tonight. Next slide, please. So this map here illustrates areas that are disproportionately affected by environmental pollution and other hazards that can lead to negative public health effects. These areas also generally have populations of people that are low income and are sensitive populations in terms of health risks. So often with high rates of chronic health issues like asthma and heart disease. The darkest orange areas are neighborhoods that are in the 95th percentile when compared to all neighborhoods in the state. So these neighborhoods score worse for these factors than 95% of all other neighborhoods in the state. But anything that scores within the 75th percentile is what the state calls a disadvantaged community, which is all but 2 neighborhoods in Baldwin Park. Next slide, please. So one of the factors that we looked at to help increase health outcomes for disadvantaged communities pertains to bike and pedestrian safety. So walking and biking provide many health benefits, but residents might not engage in these activities if they don't feel safe. So vehicle collision data indicates that collisions involving bicyclists and pedestrians are mostly concentrated in the downtown area and along major corridors such as Ramona Parkway and Baldwin Park Boulevard. These are also areas that have higher vehicle, pedestrian, and bicyclist volumes. So a focus on engineering streets to be safer, enforcement of traffic regulations, and education can reduce these types of collisions and enhance safety. Next slide, please. Another factor for improving health outcomes is park access. In Baldwin Park, few residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. However, we have some new projects in the pipeline. The Big Dalton Wash Trail Pocket Park project was initiated to develop 5 miles of Class 1 bike lanes in 4 new pocket parks, which will support new opportunities for park access in southern and central Baldwin Park. Barnes Park was just expanded, and which was on the agenda tonight. And the city is creating a pocket park in the northern portion of the city on Joan Bridge. Next slide, please. So the city had been really proactive already in addressing local quality of life and environmental concerns through the existing element. So this update really just refines some of those policies and programs and builds on the good work already being done. Only a few new programs were added that largely related to air quality, housing quality, and civic engagement. Civic engagement strategies focused on partnership building with community members and community serving organizations to facilitate a more inclusive and meaningful public participation and civic engagement process. Next slide, please. An air quality goal was already included in the original element, but new programs were added to take on a more proactive approach to addressing air quality, including planting more street trees and providing financial assistance for air filtration systems in residential homes. Next slide. A focus on providing healthy and safe housing was also added to the element, including looking for resources to support landlord/tenant mediation and weatherization/improvements to homes for low-income households. Next slide, please. So as I also mentioned earlier, the update to the housing element also triggered an update to the safety element. The draft safety element was updated in consultation with the police chief and the LA County Fire Department to address new risks associated with climate change, update emergency evacuation routes, and provide new policies to support residents through an increased number of high heat events and climate change impacts. Next slide. New programs focus on coordination among agencies as climate change influences high heat events, more wildfires, and resulting poor air quality, and a focus on supporting mental and physical well-being for Baldwin Park residents. In addition, a new program has been proposed or is included in the safety element to develop a heat response plan to respond to extreme heat events and ensure effective communication to residents during emergencies. Next slide. And so with that, I'd kind of like to go over and discuss the recommended actions for tonight. The recommended action before you tonight is to adopt Resolution PC 23-16, which recommends adopting the housing element, safety element, and health, sustainability, and environmental justice element, as well as the associated zoning code amendments. And so next slide. And this concludes my presentation to you all. I'd like to thank you all for your time this evening. Genevieve and I are here to answer any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open it up to the commission for any questions.
I have no question.
You know, it was a lot.
I know it's been a long time since I think when we first started, we were given a rundown of all of this, and I can see it because some of the slides are familiar, where the pollution of our city is just a big concern, and it's a bigger concern because I think we discussed at that point that there's a lot of building going on the outskirts of our city that we have no control over. Irwindale is building, bringing in, I guess it's FedEx over in that region of the 605 freeway. So we're going to have a lot more pollution coming from everywhere since we're surrounded by freeways. But nothing can be done about that. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, hearing no comments from the commission, we can now open public hearing for any interested parties.
None.
Being no interested parties, we will go ahead and close public hearing. Can I get a motion from the commission to approve this request?
I'll make a motion to approve PC 2316.
Second.
I think Commissioner Vasquez seconded. Can I please get a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Jen Escobosa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eric Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Mario Maciel Jr.,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ricardo Vasquez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. You're welcome.
Thank you. The commission has approved a request for consideration and recommendation of approval to the City Council on general plan amendments to repeal and replace the housing element, safety element, and health and sustainability element to meet the housing, safety, and environmental justice element state law requirements, adding Chapter 153.112 to the zoning code and zoning map and modifying zoning code subchapter 153. Thank you very much. So moving along with the agenda, do we have any other reports from staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No other reports from staff. Just FYI that we don't have a planning commission scheduled for July 12th, but we'll be sure to communicate with the commission if anything does change. I would like to add at this time, I know that we just got done with the presentation for the general plan. That is a big effort this past 2 years. We still got to take this to the council, but I want to thank Genevieve Sherrill and Jackie Martinez for all their hard work and collaboration in helping the city accomplish this heavy effort. I want to thank them for all their work. Thank you. But that's all I have to report.
No, echoing that, thank you for all the work that you put into this.
It's a lot of hard work, I know. So thank you for your time. So this will be the final stage for review, and that's it, right? It gets approved.
This will be scheduled tentatively. It looks like we're scheduling for July 19th before the city council.
And the state, this will be the final one for the state for.
Correct. Once it goes to council, we'll then the very next day we'll send it up to the state and hopefully get and receive a letter of
In compliance.
certification. Yes.
All right.
Thank you for that. Do we have any reports of officers?
No, not this time.
Do we have any commissioner staff communications?
And then, would you be able to provide us an update with the city planner hiring timeline?
Yes, good question. A selection has been made, and so we're hoping that the new city planner comes on board sometime during the month of July.
Have they accepted the position?
Yes.
Okay. Great news.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to meeting them. Well, we have reached the end of our agenda. And if there is nothing further from the commission or staff, I will motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Can I get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Janice Cabosa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eric Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Mario Maciel Jr.,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ricardo Vasquez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.